So good afternoon, everybody. Let me shut off the music so that we don't have that running in the background the whole time. But I want to welcome you to the Prop 64, um, Cohort 2 Desk Review Process webinar. And thank you for taking time out of your day to join us and have Michelle. Hopefully she'll be back on shortly if she's not already back on, to go through the desk review process and give you a little bit more information about that and invoicing and budget mods, those things that I'm sure you're all interested in getting a little bit more detail on now that you've had one full invoice, if you've had any expenditures, getting ready to submit your second one, and the supporting documentation that goes with that. But first off, welcome everybody. So I don't really want to spend a lot of time doing roll call, as it were, because we have a good sized group. But if you can put your name and county in the chat, then that way we have a record of everybody who's here, and we don't have to go around the room just to kind of check in with anybody. So greatly appreciate that. And Michelle, are you back on?
Yes, I'm here.
You are. Okay. So for introductions, you've all met myself and Michelle. And if you haven't, my name's Helene Zettner. I'm the lead field rep for the Prop 64 grants, both Cohort 1 and Cohort 2, and soon to be within the next 12 months, Cohort 3. And most of the presentation today is going to be done by Michelle Killian, who is the program and fiscal analyst for the Prop 64 grants. And I'm sure most of you have probably had at least a few conversations with her over the last, gosh, has it been not quite 6 months? So almost though. And to let you know that today's webinar training is going to be recorded, and it's going to be on our website at the resource page that hopefully you all have bookmarked and refer to. I have the web address there. Because over the next 3 years, you might have some people change and or staff changes, and this is a good resource to get them trained on a desk review, the invoicing process. But also, we are going to be doing 4 desk reviews. If you go back to orientation, we're going to do 4 desk reviews over the 3-year grant period. The first 2 are going to be invoices 2 and 3. However, if you have a minimal expenditure invoice on either one of those, or even a zeroed invoice, we're going to reschedule to another or a different invoice to complete those first 2. And then we're going to schedule the last 2 reviews in year 2 and in year 3 at some point at random. And we will let you know which invoices those are once you turn in your invoice, and then we will say, can you, submit your supporting documentations. And I don't want to steal Michelle's thunder, but that payment process is not delayed by the supporting documentation and desk review process. So we will process your invoice as normal, and then we'll do the desk review at the side. At least that's the process our division is going through currently. Hopefully that doesn't change in the next couple of years. And the reason that we're doing this is that we want to make sure that all of the grants are keeping the appropriate supporting documentation. They're getting any of their budget mods in, and to make sure any prior approvals, all that infrastructure is set up front, so we don't get halfway through the grant cycle and see that there's been something we've been either allowing or you've been reporting, or something we may have missed halfway through the grant, and then trying to adjust later. So it's also a good check and balance for us, for our organization, but also our division, with the multiple grants that we have. And the counties and cities that we have in Cohort 2 may also have grants, different grants in our division. And so they may be the same fiscal people, sometimes different, but we should all be providing the same type of technical assistance and things like that for you all. So with that, as I said earlier, we'll have regular questions and answers for just the invoicing, budget mod, desk review, anything that has to do with this fiscal process at the end. But if we have some time, because I really don't think it's going to go an hour and a half. I'll give you a little bit more information at the end about some upcoming things, and then you can just open it up to any Q&A that you have. So let's see. Oops, sorry. I've got some more people coming in. And with that, let's see. I'm going to, and see, here's what I didn't do. I didn't give Michelle host rights. So I'm doing that now while she gets
Hi, Rose.
prepared.
How are you?
And if
Good.
we can,
Have a good
if
lunch.
we can ask everybody to mute their mic, that would be great. Even though it's really, it's fun to say hi to everybody. Let's have Michelle. Are you ready?
Yeah, let me go ahead and
let me
get
start
my
sharing. And
screen shared.
That. It's great to see everybody. And that's okay. You don't have to have your camera on, but it's good to see all the different names and different we haven't had a full project director meeting because we had the training the last time. We're doing this one, but I'm going to be sending out very shortly the date for the first real project director meeting, and we'll be going over some other logistical things, and that will be in probably early December. So I'll send that out quickly because so you guys can all mark your calendars and share that link with the Zoom link with whomever you want on that call, and we'll go through the purpose of project director meetings and all that at that next meeting. So Michelle, without further ado, adieu.
Okay, can everyone see the screen okay? The Prop 64 Cohort 2 desk review. Okay,
it is up. Yep.
Okay, good. All right, so this will be probably some new information for everyone. Maybe some of it will be familiar if you recall from the grantee orientation, but that was a little while ago, so I don't really expect anyone to remember everything from that far back with everything going on. But we'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully we can answer any questions that you have. If you do have a question that comes up as I'm going over anything, feel free to unmute or put something in the chat and Helene will let me know. That way we can get all your questions answered. And then, as she mentioned, we'll have a Q&A session at the end as well. All right, first we'll go over the requirements for maintaining supporting documentation. Grantees must maintain supporting documentation for all grant expenditures claimed on all invoices. All supporting documentation must be maintained and on-site and readily available for review during BSCC site visits or virtual monitoring visits, depending on where we're at with the COVID, if Helene's able to drop by and visit you in person, or if not, it'll still be done just via the internet. Subrecipients or subgrantees, along with any community-based or non-governmental organization you are contracted with, are required to keep the same level of documentation as you are. So if you're required to keep it and maintain it, they are as well. Examples of supporting documentation are receipts, invoices, work orders, etc. Anything following the transactions of your purchases and salaries and benefits is something that we'll need as backup documentation. The invoice supporting documentation packet, as you know by now, is referred to as the desk review. Your first desk review is due on November 15th, and this one is going to be for your second invoice. Now, Helene briefly mentioned that if you do turn in a $0 invoice, if you're not claiming anything on invoice 2, we're still going to ask for a desk review. We're just going to do it on the next invoice that you claim any type of amount on. So fortunately, there's no way out of it. We will make you turn in a desk review. The desk review will be the submittal of the supporting documentation for all expenditures claimed on this invoice that you were previously told that you would have to maintain. Basically, if you claim it, you need to document it. You should have each line item claimed documented for the exact amounts you want reimbursed. You'll need to gather that supporting documentation, organize it, and submit it to the BSCC for review. You were sent the grantee salaries and benefits worksheet along with the grantee invoice supporting documentation checklist to submit along with your labeled and numbered supporting documents in the email that I sent out a little while back. I had them attached on there. We also have them on the website. You can download them from there. And then I have also now added a desk review folder to your OneDrive folder, and you will find them in there as well. So we've tried to make it as easy as possible for you to get those required documents. So if you go into your OneDrive grantee folder, they're right there for you. And we'll go into that a little more later about how you're going to submit those documents. You'll start by gathering all project-related receipts for each reimbursable item listed on the grant invoice for the reporting period the desk review is for. If you have questions about supporting documentation, please refer to the recently updated BSCC Grant Administration Guide, which can be found on our website. And if you aren't sure, if you can't find it there, because I know that is a pretty lengthy document, just send us an email. We'll take a look at it and let you know. You'll need to label all documents that you're submitting with the budget line item name and document number. For example, service and supplies, document number 1. Handwritten labels are fine. If you need to handwrite and scan it in, just make sure we're able to read it and it's not so faded that we can't see what it is. Only expenses that are incurred and paid for by the grantee during the grant cycle and before the end date of the applicable invoicing period are eligible expenses. It's important to note that this means the dates on all supporting documents must fall between the grant start date and the end date of the applicable reporting period. So just make sure everything listed and submitted is within the dates that you're claiming the amount of money for. Here's an example of a scanned receipt for some supplies purchased with grant money. You'll need to label which supporting document is at the top, highlight the items that are being claimed, and then show the breakdown for what you're claiming. If you have Adobe, you can do it that way, or if you need to handwrite and highlight, then that's fine as well. Just make sure the writing is legible. So if you are handwriting, make sure it's legible. I know this is a very simplified version since you'll most likely be submitting multiple receipts for the whole quarter, and they probably will have different items on them, maybe not all being claimed under this grant. So you'll have to do some highlighting, marking, let us know which line items and which numbers you're actually claiming. Just make sure each one is labeled and specified for what you are claiming so we can see clearly. This is just an example here. Like I said, it's pretty simplified, but you can see there's different items listed. So you just highlight the items that you are claiming, and then you'll put the total that you're claiming. That way we can see the actual receipt showing your purchases. On this slide, you'll see the grantee invoice supporting documentation checklist. One of the documents I referenced before, one of the documents that's now in your OneDrive folder. You'll see some of the same categories listed here that you're familiar with from working on your invoices. They coincide with the line items in your workbook. At the top of the form, you'll need to note which invoice you're providing supporting documentation for, along with the reporting period. You'll then complete the table as it relates to the invoice you listed at the top of the form, filling in whatever line items are applicable. You'll list the amount and support documents provided for each category here. Be sure to have the authorized financial officer sign and date approval at the bottom before submitting. So they're going to need to go in and sign off, just marking approval. It's the same type of system as we have for the invoice. We want to make sure there's checks and balances and everything is being looked at thoroughly. The grantee invoice supporting documentation checklist is what you'll use to list out the amounts that you have claimed on your invoices, along with the supporting documentation that matches up with them. For one, salaries and benefits, you'll list the total amount of grant funds claimed and then enter grantee salary and benefits worksheet in the attached docs section. So basically, you're just going to write the amount claimed, which attached docs are showing evidence for that claim, and then that green field is just for our comments where we'll go in and mark off as we review it. So just make it as clear as you can. We try to keep it simple, but we do need to look over all of the supporting documentation. So if you're claiming 200 in service and supplies for a printer, then the attached document you'll need to submit would be the receipt for the printer. Make sure that all of your supporting documents are easy to navigate in order to see the corresponding amounts claimed. You can highlight and write stuff on them as you need to. And here is an example about how you can label and highlight another receipt. So here you'll see there's a couple receipts, again, very simplified, but you have supporting doc 1, supporting doc 2, supporting doc 3. You've highlighted each amount that you're claiming on each receipt, and then you have a total marked up there so we can see the total that you're claiming from them. And then up there in the salaries and benefits worksheet, you're going to put the amount claimed, and then you'll put supporting docs 1, 2, and 3. That way I know you're claiming this amount, and the documentation you have to support it is marked 1, 2, and 3. And this is really helpful, especially if there's really long receipts or even salary worksheets that have a ton of information, so we know which parts you're actually claiming, because we know your entire office doesn't only exist for the Prop 64 grant, and I'm sure there's other things you have on it as well. So just make sure you mark it so we know what you're actually claiming under this grant. All right, and this includes tax and shipping fees. If you need to claim those as well, make sure you mark that on the documentation. Don't be surprised if we go back and forth for clarification on the desk review when you submit it. It's just for clarification and to make sure you have everything you need lined up to be in a good place, especially since this grant is brand new and it is probably going to be audited. So we're just getting everything set up and in a good place for everyone. Right, this slide is for the next document in the desk review process, the salaries and benefits worksheet. For category 1, salaries and benefits, you only need to fill out the worksheet. You do not need to provide timesheets. Please continue to keep timesheets on site as part of your records, but don't send them in with the desk review. Your field rep, Helene, may ask for them during a field review or monitoring visit, so she may request to see them at that time, but you don't have to send them in automatically with your desk review. You can see from the example on this slide that you'll enter each employee's name and title, who is being paid fully or partially by grant funds, and the breakdown of their hours and pay, along with any benefits paid out. So this worksheet was set up to try to make it as easy as possible for you to enter salaries being claimed, their breakdown, and so we can see if they're not being claimed full-time, what part are being claimed. That way we can follow the numbers and add up what you are claiming for your salaries and benefits. We'll now look at some examples of how to fill out the salaries and benefits worksheet. It allows you to enter pay based on salary or hourly. If it's a salaried employee, you'll be listing out their monthly or quarterly salary. If it's an hourly employee, you'll list out their pay based on how many hours they have worked. For either, you'll list the individual's name and position along with their benefits rate. And this is especially important for the position name, as that's what you have listed in the narrative on your invoice workbook, because we will go through your budget narrative and make sure everything matches up. So that's why we ask for that information. You can see the difference between recording an hourly and a salaried employee. For hours or percent full-time employee, you'll list either the amount of hours worked or the percentage of time dedicated to the project for salaried employees. You can see here that a 1 is listed. This means that this is a full-time employee on the grant. You'll then list either the hourly pay or monthly salary of the employee for the number of months or 1. You'll enter however many months are being claimed for a salaried employee. So basically hourly breakdown or the salary rate. So if it's an hourly employee, we need the amount of hours worked. If it's a salaried employee, we need the amount of months worked based on the percentage that they work. So if it's a full-time employee for the grant and you're claiming 1 month salary, you're going to want to put that it's 1 month salary. Right. Since you've already listed the amount of hours and their hourly rate that you're claiming, you'll then enter the total of salary claimed and then move into the benefits section. Here you'll enter the percentage of benefits, the amount, and then the total of salary and benefits combined. You'll need to do an individual line for every employee that you are claiming grant funds for. So there's a whole bunch of lines on here. So if you have 6 people that you're claiming salaries or benefits for under the grant, make sure you list them all individually with their individual breakdown. We want to be able to see pay rate, amount claimed, and who you're claiming it for. The instructions sent out with the other desk review documents will outline some of the types of documentation you can provide for the other categories. Remember to check the BSCC Grant Administration Guide for a more complete list. These instructions are also posted on the website, with the other fiscal information from the grantee orientation. Excuse me. So hopefully the instructions are helpful as you read through them, but if you don't find something you're looking for, you're not sure, just send us an email. We'll take a look at it and answer it for you. For number 2, service and supplies, you can provide itemized receipts, customer invoices, supplier invoices, internet receipts, etc. It should be easy when viewing them to identify the vendor name, form of payment, amount of item or service, total paid, dates of purchase, and description of items. And this is where it will come in to where if the receipt's not very clear, you're going to want to highlight, circle, or make a note. That way we can see what you are claiming. For category 3, professional services, you can use copies of invoices, work orders, etc. If the invoice or work order does not provide sufficient detail, include a one-page statement that describes the amount expended and how it meets the requirement of the grant program. So if your backup documentation, you're looking at it and you're like, this isn't thorough enough, I don't think it's going to actually show them what we were doing, go ahead and write up a summary. That way you let us know. Explanations are very important. And if you don't think it's clear, write up an explanation. That way we have that, we can look it over, we can check in with you with any questions that we have. I know sometimes you get a receipt and maybe it's not as complete as you'd like it to be, and you can't really control what the company does. So if you do feel that way, go ahead and just write up a summary for us. You'll be able to read through the instructions for the other categories once you've begun your desk review. Remember, you can always email in questions if you're unsure. You'll also want to list any information for community-based organizations you've partnered with. Make sure if you partner with any new ones to let us know so we can update that information on our end. That's some other details we always need to have on record is what CBOs you are working with. So if you do add any, change any, you're thinking about changing any, just let us know so we can record that, because we do need to have that listed in your invoice workbook and just for our documentation. This final page of the instructions outlines how to assemble and submit the supporting documentation. Once all supporting documents are labeled and accurately matched to the invoice, the authorized financial officer should sign off on the grantee invoice supporting documentation checklist. This checklist will be the face page for the desk review packet. You'll need to scan all of your supporting documentation in order to create a single PDF document for submission. This should contain all of the documents we went over. So you're going to want to have that as your cover page, have the other required documents, have everything scanned as one PDF. So we have it in basically one digital packet. How should you submit your desk review packet once you're all done? You can either upload it to your OneDrive grantee folder and email me to let me know that it's in there. Or if you encounter any issues with this, you can email it as an attachment to the Prop 64 Cohort 2 inbox. Either email it in or email me to let me know that you have it in your OneDrive folder. Unfortunately, on OneDrive, it doesn't always notify me if you've added anything. So once you're all done, that way you have time to add what you need, put everything together, get it into one scan. And if you do have it in there and ready, just send me an email, let me know it's in there, and I'll go in and review it. And if you do have any trouble with that, though, you can email it as an email attachment to the Prop 64 inbox. Just let me know it's all done and you're ready for it to be reviewed. As I mentioned, there's a new folder now in your OneDrive folder, and it's labeled Desk Review. And the only thing in there are those 2 documents that you'll need. So you should have plenty of space to work with, adding whatever you need to. Please let me know if you have any questions as you're assembling your desk review packet. I know it's always easy in theory to understand, and then once you start going through it, stuff comes up. So if anything does, just send me an email, or if you want us to look at something, you can send it over and we'll take a look at it. Try to answer any questions you have. And that's basically it for the presentation. So does anyone have any questions in regard to the desk review or any of the documentations or how to put it together?
And I do want to make one note too, as Michelle talked about the NGO or subcontractor supporting documentation, is that in part, since you're the fiduciary agent, you're going to need to make sure that all that documentation from your subcontractor is exactly what you would be keeping for us, in order to, when I come out to do a comprehensive monitoring visit, or as Michelle said, at some point we're going to be audited both programmatically and fiscally, and that's just a matter of time. And then also for your final financial audit, it'll make it a lot easier. One of the best practices for that is to do something like this with them and let them know exactly what it is. It can't just be, something that's out of their general ledger, or an invoice that says a person's name, how many hours they worked, and their pay rate. Kind of like, what are they, if you don't have a rules and responsibility for that person, then you're going to need to have a little bit more information for their supporting documentation. So we tend to see not a good depth of supporting documentation with subcontractors. So just kind of know that you're the fiduciary agent on behalf of the state to make sure that they have the exact same stuff um, you would need for us. So let's see, Rocky, looks like you're up.
Hi,
Hi.
Michelle. Hi.
Oh,
Hi.
that's Rocky.
So I haven't been able to attend many of these, and I'm sorry about that. So if my question has been answered previously, I apologize. But in the beginning, you said that the reporting period can include, so for the second quarterly report, it could be from the beginning of the grant date to the end of the quarterly reporting period, right? So it could include the last quarter.
Yeah, so the
Okay.
desk review, this desk review is going to be for invoice 2. So anything you're claiming on invoice 2 is what you're going to want to provide documentation for. But you can claim on an invoice if, say, January you missed, or say last month you missed reporting something and you're like, oh, I missed that. Can I add it to the next invoice? That's fine. We just want you to report the date. So pretty much it needs to fall within the grant period. It doesn't have to be within a specific quarter if you're claiming.
Okay, great. So then my follow-up question to that is, attending these webinars that, I've had several staff just attend, is that something that can be claimed? They're on hourly? Just curious.
Yes and no. If they are working as part of the grant and you're going to be claiming them either as part of your indirect cost, or they're actually listed for that one time. When Michelle usually looks at it, we look at who's on regular payroll for the grant. So if it's a one-time thing just for them to, view a couple hours worth, then just notate that these are not that in the comment section on the invoice, that these staff are, fiscal staff getting trained on the documentation or the PowerPoints, but are not staff actually working on the activities that are part of the project description.
Okay, but yes, it does. So the staff that's continuously working on this as part of the grant, that's a yes. Okay. Yeah. No, that's very clear. This was really helpful. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. Very comprehensive.
You're welcome. And Michelle, I'll go through the ones in the comments. And just as a general overview, this is paid in arrears. So the payment has to have cleared the books first. So if you're waiting like on laptops, but you're just waiting for the receipt of them and then you do the payment, you have to wait until they're actually paid for. And then same thing, that if, you've paid for something and then something has to be returned, you need to notate that on those invoices. But as Michelle said, anything that goes back to the start of the grant, May 1st, through the continuous 3-year cycle, you can always put those expenditures, if they're grant related, on a subsequent invoice, and that piece of documentation has to be kept with that invoice that it was claimed on. So if it happened 6 months ago, we want it to be the supporting documentation with the invoice you're actually claiming it on. Okay, so let's see what we have. So we have, is there a limit to the size of the document BSCC can receive from an outside source? There is an option to submit an MP3 file when the packet is too large. However, this option has a 48-hour retrieval window. Oh,
That
Michelle.
actually, that's actually where OneDrive is going to come in and be great, because in that case, you can just put it in your OneDrive folder and then you don't have to email it in at all. So just have it in your OneDrive folder, drag it in there. When it's all done, send me an email, let me know it's in there, and then I'll review it in there. So that way you don't have to actually send it as an email attachment at all, because I know that is an issue. We've had plenty emails bounce back because the size is too large.
Yep, the state has a it's kind of a small firewall for that. Okay, let's see. What must we submit if we don't have expenditures yet?
Great question. So that would be, you would be submitting a $0 invoice for invoice 2. So there would be nothing to submit for invoice 2. That means we're going to make you submit a desk review for a different invoice. So when you do make any claims or submit an invoice, I'm going to send you an email and let you know, okay, we're going to require a desk review for this one from you. So if you don't have anything for invoice 2, we're going to have you make it up on a different invoice, and that'll be on a case-by-case basis depending on who has and hasn't claimed anything. So you'll get an email from me letting you know about a different invoice you can submit the desk review for.
And just so you guys all know, it's pretty common first couple of invoices not to have any expenditures, even though you might be expending, but you don't have the paperwork and everything ready to go, which is totally fine. We just will pick a different invoice to submit the documentation. Oh, I just lost my chat. So go ahead, and if you want to raise your hand, that way we can make sure we call on you live. If not, I'm going to continue for the chat. Could you please reiterate the deadlines for desk review submissions?
So for this desk review, it is due with invoice number 2. You don't have to submit them at the same time, but it is due November 15th. So we do ask that you get it prepped and ready and submitted by then. If you do need extra time, send me an email asking for the extra time. That way I can make a note that you're still working on it. So please just let me know, and that way I can let you know what kind of an extension we can give. But typically the desk review for the invoice we're asking for it on is due the same due date as the invoice.
And just know that I'm the one that pokes Michelle to poke you all for the documentation. So don't be mad. Don't be mad at the messenger.
So I will be reaching out if you don't turn it in and asking why you haven't turned it in if you haven't asked for an extension, because Helena will want to know.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? There's nothing left in the chat. I don't know.
I have a quickie question.
Sure.
How do we, for backup documentation, we get indirect costs, a certain amount. How would you like those documented? There's not an invoice or anything like that.
Absolutely.
That, I mean, I know that can get a little tricky, but you're going to want to pull all of the documentation you do have for that. And that's probably going to be where you're going to start marking, highlighting, circling what you are claiming. Because I know it's a certain percentage a lot of times of something. So if you show us the total and then you tell us the percent claimed, we can look at it that way. So I know that that can become a little cumbersome with a lot of papers. Just try to mark as clearly as possible which items and the breakdown of it so we can see.
And
we're
that's
used to getting,
go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, we're used to getting documentation with all kinds of stuff on it. You have maybe one line highlighted for the item that you need claimed. So it's not unusual for that to happen.
If you have an indirect cost rate that has been approved, that single document, so say it's either federally approved or locally approved for your organization, we would just need that one document with that approved percentage and the methodology on how that indirect cost rate was calculated. So if it's calculated specifically with just salaries and benefits, then that's great. If it is a methodology that also includes, rent, utilities, all that, we just want to see the methodology on how that is computed, but we only need it once. So you don't need to send it in with every desk review. You can let Michelle know that, because we'll have that on file. But that will be the supporting documentation for your entire grant on what you submit. So did that answer your question? Yes. Okay. Let's see. We have another one in the chat. If the work was performed during the last reporting period, but the invoice from the subrecipient is dated afterwards, would we invoice that on November 15th?
So like Colleen mentioned, we pay in arrears. So if the subrecipient, it hasn't invoiced you yet and you haven't paid it yet, then we're not going to reimburse you yet. We reimburse you after you make the payment. So you would want to put that on the next invoice once the payments actually happened. And you can note on your invoice, you can just put from these months to these months, received invoice on this date, and we'll know, and that's fine. But everything is in reimbursement, so we won't reimburse you for anything until you've already paid it.
Right. And if you, depending on the contracting that you might have with a subrecipient or a subcontractor, we don't get into the contracting processes, but since we pay the grantee in arrears, you might pay them up front and then we can reimburse you. There are others that will wait until you get reimbursed to reimburse your subrecipient. So it totally depends, but we're looking at what you as the grantee have actually had an expenditure for, and it's actually hit your GL and been paid out. Same thing with like a piece of equipment. If you don't pay for it until it's actually receipted, don't put it on an invoice on this invoice. If it actually hasn't hit your GL until November, then you would put it on your invoice that's due in February for October, November, December. We just want to make sure that it's already hit your books, it's already paid out, and then we can reimburse you. Hopefully that answered your question, Patrick. If not, let us know. And then we have another one. When we have partial receipt of equipment, how would you like to see that? Example, the radio for the vehicle has not been received, or has been received, but the vehicle has not.
So that depends on when you're claiming it. So if you paid for and received the radio and you're claiming the radio, then that will go on the invoice. And then later on, when you receive the vehicle and you're claiming for the vehicle, that will go on that invoice. So if you want to do it separately, you can, as long as you've already paid it and you have that receipt. If you want to hold on to the receipt for the radio and submit it with the vehicle, that's also fine. So that's a preference thing for you, whatever is easier for you, as long as you've already paid it and you have that receipt, then you can claim it.
Correct, because we're
And
just looking at that it's been paid.
yeah.
If your process is that it hasn't been received, because we know that a lot of the trucks and things are on back order or are waiting, but you may have already had to pay it up front. You can still claim it because you have the actual documentation that it is hit, something code for Prop 64, however you're coding the grant money to seek reimbursement for. But then if something happens down the line, then we can also back that out, say they gave you a bigger discount because it took them so long. Then we can back that out with your documentation that shows that you got an additional discount for that. So hopefully that helps. We have expended for training out of town. How are meals reimbursed?
Meals is a tricky one because any type of food or meals, basically, you have to have prior approval from your field rep, Helene. So that's something you're going to want to send an email in, itemized list and cost of the meals, what they were for, and then she'll take a look at it and let you know if she approves that. So that would be your first step.
Yeah, I'm assuming that these are that they are per diem meals for staff that has actually gone for training. So I'm making that assumption. And it was out of town. So if you have a per diem, like a county or a city per diem rate for meals, lodging, all that, you can claim that. We'll just need to see your per diem and lodging and all those rates that you have, for your county administration or city administration on what you can claim, because then you can claim that and we will reimburse that. If you don't, which since most of these of you guys are in an actual jurisdiction, if you have a subcontractee who is doing the per diem, they need to either follow their own, if it's or if they don't, then they have to use the state's rate. Can never use more than this state's rate if you're a subcontractor. But since the contracts are all with cities and counties, you can use your city and county per diem rate if this is what if it's for an employee. And it should be for an employee that we have listed in the application or for the salaries and benefits. And if it's not, and it's for someone else, then we'll need to talk because we need to match the people being paid by the grant and those going for training. So we need to match up who's going to training and if we're paying them to do services and activities for the grant. Okay. No more hands? No more hands? No? Jeff? No? Okay. See, when you have your camera on, I can call you. Okay. So if you have any more questions, please feel free. You know how to get a hold of both Michelle and I. As she stated and I stated, the documents that she showed you and everything that is for the desk review is already out on your website on your resource page. This recording will be up there by the end of the week, probably be up there by tomorrow, but never know what our IT's workload is. And that way you can refer to it later. As Michelle said, this process in the first two invoices where we do this process, there's usually a lot of back and forth. Don't, try not to get frustrated with either us or what we're required to ask of you. It's more of just let's make sure we're all on the same page because this will be what the documentation needs to be going forward. We are, as I said many times, we are going to be audited. This is a voter initiative, so they're going to be auditing us. We just want to make sure everything is that infrastructure set early on instead of trying to clean up something later. Okay, no more in the chat. I don't see any more hands. Okay, so we'll finish this off. I told you it wasn't going to take an hour and a half, but I just wanted to let you know that the recording from the cannabis industry, public health and equity that was back on September 8th, that has been posted to the website if you didn't already see it. Also, the contact lists for both cohorts of projects are on the resource page. So yours, if you want to kind of network and see projects and contact your peers in your cohort, that list as of October 8th is up on the website. If you need to make a correction to that list, please reach out to Michelle and submit a new contact information sheet. But there's also the same one over for cohort 1. So there's 10 jurisdictions in cohort 1. If you think that there is one that's real similar and you want to reach out to them and see, how they did something, how their implementation was, that list is under the cohort 1, which you can get to by kind of backtracking, just going to the main Prop 64 page and click the cohort 1 link, whereas normally you guys would click cohort 2. And we'll try to, in the future, probably not until after the first of the year, do a couple project director meetings where we can combine everybody so that there can be some interaction with what you all are doing and trying to do their 6 months ahead of you guys in their process. So hopefully that will prove meaningful for you guys going into the end of year 1 and them being in the middle of year 1. Let's see. Oh, we do have another question before I keep going. Okay, so just to be clear, if we have a zero expenditure we have no expenditures to claim in this inboard period, we do not need to submit any of the desk review documents. Correct, but you do need to submit a zero invoice.
Yeah, that is one thing. I know seems kind of strange that you'd submit an invoice when you have not claimed anything and it's $0, but we do have to have that as a official record that you are not claiming on that invoice to keep your workbook complete. So basically it's just filling out the bottom portion, the 2 name areas, the date, and submit it. And that's all you have to do. But we do have to have that. So if you are claiming $0, still submit the invoice, even though you won't be submitting a desk review for that invoice.
And I still get to approve them.
Yeah, that's true.
I get to approve that you're not claiming anything. Okay, so that was it for really the project director calls. I'm gonna start out by splitting them in half because there's 23 of you guys in the cohort 2, and sometimes that you can get the same information from me if we split into 2 calls, but it's really hard to kind of have a discussion about the projects and challenges and things like that when there's so many people on. So at least the first one that I'm going to do, we're going to split it into 11 and 12, and maybe rotate so that you're not always with the same jurisdictions, but we'll see how that goes. So be patient with me as I try to figure out the quantity of cohort 2. For you guys, thank you for submitting your local evaluation plans. Ashley has been going through them, and we are going to start in November. She's going to start contacting a few folks. We're going to start some of those calls in November. And she'll have all the information listed in that email. We basically want to go through questions we might have, things that we just may need clarification, things that she looking at that metric or matrix that she has of things that should be in it, maybe things that we missed or is not included, because as a reminder, all these local evaluation plans will be posted on our website. So we want to make sure that there is clear for public, for whoever is looking at those, and we won't be posting the final ones until we go through all of them, give you guys an opportunity to augment them, adjust them however you see fit, and then we'll be posting them. Probably won't be until at least February or March, because the holidays. We'll just get as many calls as we can in November and December, and we just post them all at once, so it'll take us a while to get through those. And other than that, just so you guys know, there is cohort 3. I kind of already talked about that, is going to be starting for this grant. I can't answer any questions about what it's going to be because I have no idea. All I know is that in the middle of November, we go to our board to ask permission to get a chair, which is usually someone from the board, and to compile an executive steering committee of subject matter experts to put together a new RFP that will go out to the field, I believe, at our April board meeting. So just know that I don't know the executive steering committee gets to make all the decisions on what that looks like. So with the rev and tax code still being the same, that's pretty much what they have to work with. And so just know that that's coming, and there's $120 million that we have to give out. So just be aware that that's coming probably in April. The RFP will come out. So let's see. Any other questions? No hands raised, nothing in the chat. Okay, I'm going to leave you with the dad joke. I want to thank Fresno for giving me a topic to use. Okay, so thank you. What did one tectonic plate say when it bumped into the other tectonic plate? What did one tectonic plate say when it bumped into the other? Sorry, my fault. Okay, so thank you.
Someone put in the chat, they thought the answer was what's shaking.
What's shaking? Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. That is funny. So anyway, let us know if you have any questions. This will be on the website soon. And if you need anything between now and submitting your documentation, just reach out to us.